I was admitted to the hospital for food poisoning. They got me into bed and the hospital floor was surprisingly cold. It was summer and I was wearing slippers to the hospital, so my feet were bare, and I noticed that my feet were very dirty. I was lying alone in a hospital bed. It was dark, the lights were off, and everything was quiet at night. I had a hard time falling asleep. My hands were bandaged, I was on antibiotics, I felt like I was going to pass out, and the dizziness was not pleasant. I grabbed the bed rails. After that feeling passed, I thought I had recovered from the coma. That's when I realized I was no longer in my body. I had a very strange feeling. I couldn't feel my body, but I knew I wasn't paralyzed. Then I got up and stood up. Just then, I noticed that the hospital floor was no longer cold. I couldn't feel the temperature of the floor. I could see my body on the bed and I wasn't afraid of it or scared to leave it. It's the same feeling you get when you get out of the car. It's just there, still there, and you don't think about it anymore. I don't worry about it at all. It wasn't scary, and I never worried about it. At this point in time, the room started to get bigger, and it was like a time warp happened. The windows on the wall got bigger too. I was alone in the ward when suddenly a man appeared in front of me. He had his back to me and was wearing a robe. He looked to be about 50 years old and I didn't recognize him. I was not frightened by his appearance in the room. Then, everything went dark. I didn't worry about my sudden blindness, I just accepted the fact that it was getting dark. I put my hand in front of my face to see if I could see my hand, but I couldn't. I knew I was still standing, and I knew I hadn't walked out of the hospital room. It was just that everything went black. There was no sound in this darkness, and I couldn't feel anything within me. It wasn't scary, and I wasn't worried. Just then, in the darkness, a door was opened. The door was far away from me. And as I was about to walk toward it, in an instant, I was in front of it. When I put my hand on the doorknob, I felt like I was going back to my own home. When I opened the door, the room was pure white. The first thing I noticed was the seam between the floor and the wall, which I thought was odd. There were no sharp edges at the seams. Then I started looking up the wall, looking for the seam where the walls met, and there was no sharp edge either. I had never seen anything like it, and when I looked up at the wall, I saw the ceiling of heaven. It was blue sky, and the sky here was more vivid and beautiful. I had never even seen a sky like this before. It was huge. There were some birds in the sky, and I didn't know I was in heaven. That's when the male angel appeared. We could communicate through telepathy. He didn't speak in a human way. It was all in the mind. He didn't have wings. He was dressed like the person next to me. He was very handsome. He reminded me of a boy I liked in school. He was tall, blonde, and strong-looking. He wore a red shirt on top and jeans and black sneakers underneath. At this point he smiled and said, "Do you want to stay or go back?" I felt I had enough time to make a choice. I immediately thought of my mother. I could see her in the living room of our house, and I could feel my mother's sadness, and it made me worry that she would be upset if I stayed in heaven. If I stayed, would I miss my mother too much? A female angel appeared. She was blonde, smaller than me, and wearing a yellow dress. She didn't have wings either. Then she said, "You don't have to worry, your relationship with your mother will change later." I was thinking about staying in this place or going back to Earth. Then the angel reminded me, in the future there will be a war on Earth. Now I don't know what that means, but I know that this fight has nothing to do with money or food, it is something else and it will happen soon. Then the angel showed me the war. I saw that I was still on Earth and very old. I was running with a group of people, led by a soldier, but I didn't know what kind of uniform he was wearing. I saw that the man had a rifle, I could see smoke and hear shots being fired, I could see sandbags, and the walls of the block we were running on. The soldier also had a square backpack on his back. It reminded me of a World War I soldier, and then the scene ended. The angel who showed me all this was stopped by a man. This man, whom I could not see, said, "You must go back, you have a lot of work to do on earth, although I do not know what that work is," and then I had the feeling of falling, and I went back to my bed in the hospital. My father grabbed my hand and had a very happy look on his face. It was an expression I had never seen before or since. The nurse said welcome back, and she looked at my father and then at me. Over the years, I have remembered this incident. My anger at my sister caused us to fight all the time, and that anger has gone away. We never fought again. I didn't tell my father what I was going through. I didn't think he would believe me. Later I gave birth to my son, who is a doctor. As for the war I see coming, I will have to let time tell, but of course I do hope for world peace and no war ever.